My name is Jordan Blake. I'm 33 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the man who humiliated me in front of the entire company, only to end up working for me. It happened on a Wednesday. Mid-morning, quarterly all-hands Zoom meeting. Over 100 people logged in, cameras on. The kind of meeting where people fake smiles and sip coffee, waiting for the CEO to ramble through his vision board slides. I was head of operations, the person who kept the engine running, the one who stayed late fixing the fires other departments started. I had no reason to think the day would be different, until it was. Nathan Crowley, our CEO, sharp suit, smug smirk, always 5 minutes late, begins talking about a strategic realignment. Everyone perks up. He smiles into the camera and says, "As we look ahead to next quarter, we've made some decisions about team structure." Then, casually, like he's announcing the weather, he drops it. As of today, the operations department is no longer aligned with the company's future vision. Jordan Blake, we thank you for your service. No warning, no email, no call, just that. My face burned. I saw the chat flood with "wait, what?" and "oh my God." I sat there muted, camera on, trying not to break. I remember gripping my coffee mug so hard it left an imprint on my palm. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Nathan kept talking like nothing happened. Someone clapped. Someone else logged off. And I just sat there, erased, publicly discarded by a man who couldn't have built half of what I maintained. He didn't just fire me, he made a spectacle of it. He wanted people to know who was in charge, who had the power. But in that moment of humiliation, something inside me shifted. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I closed my laptop, sat in the silence of my tiny apartment, and made myself a quiet promise. I wouldn't fight back loud. I'd fight smart. And one day, he'd find himself sitting across from me, not as my boss, but as the man begging me for a job. I grew up in Cincinnati, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, and still found time to pack my lunch with handwritten notes. She believed in 3 things: show up, stay humble, and outwork everyone in the room. I was the first in my family to go to college, a scholarship kid with chipped nails from weekend shifts and a mind wired for efficiency. I didn't have connections. I had drive. After graduation, I landed a job at Vertex Innovations, a mid-sized tech company with more ambition than structure. The CEO, Nathan Crowley, was a former investor with a perfect jawline and a God complex. He loved to talk about disrupting legacy systems while sipping overpriced whiskey. I started in admin, answering phones, taking notes no one would read. But I watched everything. I saw where the leaks were, and quietly, I began to patch them. I built spreadsheets that made other people's jobs easier, created workflows, suggested changes that cut project timelines in half. And when a department had quit mid-quarter, I stepped in. No promotion, no raise, and held the line. That's how it always went. I wasn't the loudest voice, but I was the one who kept things from collapsing. A fixer. Nathan liked having someone like me, someone who made the chaos disappear without asking for credit. He'd introduce me as our operations ninja in board meetings, like I was a novelty. He never once called me a leader. Over the years, I trained most of the senior team. I built systems they still rely on today. When departments failed, I was the one who salvaged them. When deadlines loomed, I stayed until the lights shut off. I earned the staff's trust, their respect. But when VP roles opened, Nathan passed me over for his friends, people with fancier resumes and worse ideas. He spent money on yacht retreats and keynote speakers, called it culture building. Meanwhile, I was putting out fires with a garden hose and duct tape. My partner, Liam, begged me to leave more than once. "You're killing yourself for a man who wouldn't flinch if you vanished," he'd say. But I stayed. I told myself I was building something, earning something. That loyalty would pay off. Then came that Zoom call. That moment didn't just burn. It shattered me. Not because I lost a job, but because I realized I'd built my identity in a house someone else could bulldoze without warning. I wasn't just fired. I was erased. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know who I was without the work. Within 30 minutes of that Zoom call, I was locked out of my email, Slack, and every internal file I had spent years building. No exit meeting, no handoff, just silence, and then a generic HR email titled Transition Support Packet. It contained a vague thank you, a weak Cobra health plan, and a suggestion to explore new chapters. I called HR. The woman on the line sounded like she was reading from a script. This was part of an executive-level restructure. Unfortunately, we're not authorized to share further details. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't a mistake. It was orchestrated. Coworkers, people I had mentored, trained, gone to bat for, started reaching out privately. "Are you okay?" We were shocked. None of us saw it coming. And the one that stuck. "Nathan's been weird since that board meeting last quarter. You stole the room. He didn't like it." That was the moment the fog started to lift. It wasn't just a layoff. It was a takedown. Nathan didn't fire me because I failed. He fired me because I made him look small. Because the board was starting to see what I could do and what he couldn't. I'd built too much loyalty, earned too much trust. I was too close to being indispensable, and that threatened a man who was all ego and optics. But even with that clarity, I unraveled. I spent 2 weeks in bed. Liam tried to pull me out of it, but I kept replaying that call. The silence, the humiliation. I felt disposable, powerless. Like all my work, my worth had vanished with a mouse click. Then one morning, a small envelope arrived in the mail. A handwritten note from Avery, a junior analyst I had hired 2 years earlier. She had been overlooked, shy, unsure. I saw her potential and fought to get her on real projects. The card said, "Jordan, you were the reason I stayed. You taught me how to lead. You believed in me when no one else did. I hope wherever you go next, they know how lucky they are." That card sat in my lap for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking because that one small message reminded me. Nathan could lock me out of systems, but he couldn't delete what I built. Not in the people, not in the culture. He wanted to erase me. I decided I'd make sure he'd never forget me instead. And when I came back, I wouldn't be fighting for a seat at his table. I'd be building the damn table myself. I took what little severance I got, barely enough for 3 months of bills, and stretched it like my life depended on it. Because it did. But instead of job hunting, I started researching. Not just competitors, not just options. I studied Vertex like a hostile witness. The more I looked, the more I saw how thin the foundation really was. Nathan had built a company that looked polished from the outside, but it was all smoke and mirrors. Flashy investor decks, bloated headcounts, overpromised product timelines, and no real depth. I found out they were prepping for a Series C raise, but the deadlines I used to manage were slipping. badly, without me keeping the gears turning. Things were falling apart. To stay afloat, I picked up freelance consulting gigs, advising mid-stage startups, optimizing systems, fixing what others broke. And that's when I started running into people. Ex-employees, people Nathan pushed out, people who remembered how I treated them. One coffee turned into two, then a phone call, then a dinner. Soon, I had a silent network. Product managers, engineers, sales reps, people with real skills and real resentment. All of them trusted me. All of them felt used, so I started building. Quietly, I formed an LLC with two of them. Miranda, a brilliant product designer, and Dev, an engineer, who'd practically coded Vertex's original platform from scratch. Together, we started designing something better, leaner, cleaner, more honest. A platform that solved the same core problem Vertex bloated, but without the fluff, without the lies. And then came the twist. I found out through a former marketing lead that Nathan was trying to acquire a small startup in Seattle, trying to buy innovation because his team couldn't build it anymore. That startup, they were quietly considering a second offer. Mine, meanwhile, I was learning fast. I immersed myself in everything I didn't know: business strategy, cap tables, equity, venture capital law. I read pitch decks like bedtime stories, took notes from investors, watched how power moved in a room. And that's how I met Evelyn Park. She was a former Vertex investor, the kind Nathan loved to impress at parties, until he ignored her warnings and lost her millions. I approached her carefully, respectfully, and told her everything. My story, the product, the vision. She listened, really listened. Her words after our second meeting: "You're the kind of founder I'd bet on. Not because you're polished, but because you've got something he never did: credibility." And she had deep pockets. While Nathan was throwing launch parties and bluffing his way through board calls, I was moving in silence. Evelyn helped me set up multiple shell LLCs. Nothing shady, just strategic. Quietly, we bought up small public shares of Vertex stock as the price dipped from product delays and investor skepticism. I watched the cracks form. I watched the press releases get more desperate. I watched from the shadows as the house Nathan built on my work started leaning, and by the end of the year, I had three things Nathan Crowley feared most: leverage, a better product, and the capital to take everything he stole and build something stronger. I wasn't loud. I wasn't vengeful. I was surgical, and I was just getting started. Exactly 1 year to the day after that humiliating Zoom call, I walked into Vertex's rebrand gala, the one Nathan had hyped for weeks to the tech press and potential investors. The ballroom was drenched in cold LED lights and empty buzzwords, all of it trying too hard to distract from a failing product and a leadership team running on fumes. I was listed on the guest list as a potential partner. Evelyn made sure of that. She arrived first, flawless in navy silk and sharper than any man in the room, and nodded to me across the floor like we were about to make history. And we were. I saw Nathan before he saw me, laughing too loudly, with some junior VC, probably reciting another inflated metric. But when his eyes landed on me, everything stopped. His jaw twitched, his face paled. For a man who prided himself on control, he looked suddenly exposed. "You," he said, like it was a curse. I smiled, warm and calm. "Just attending. Figured I owed it to the company I helped build." He laughed, fake, forced, and muttered something about security. But Evelyn appeared beside me and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You invited him," she said, her voice smooth but iron underneath. "You just didn't know it yet." The rest of the evening moved like a chess match we'd already won. While Nathan played host, Evelyn and I met with board members one by one, sharing private reports, financial inconsistencies, delayed product, timelines, and our plan: stabilize the company, shift the product focus, clean house. Evelyn had quietly acquired 11% of Vertex stock. I had 4%. Add in the former execs and employees who had converted their trust in me into proxy shares. We had over 26% control, enough to force a vote. It didn't even have to get loud. Word spread through the board that Nathan was a liability. The investors were spooked. The numbers didn't lie. And most importantly, no one wanted to bet on a man who had just been outmaneuvered by the person he'd humiliated. So during the closed-door session, Evelyn stood and called a motion for leadership reevaluation. The board voted 7-2. Nathan Crowley was removed as CEO for failure to fulfill fiduciary and operational duties. When the decision was announced, he tried to object, blamed the market, blamed cancel culture, blamed me. But no one stopped him when he stood up and walked out. He left with nothing but the echo of the applause that followed me when I stepped forward later that night. The company issued a public statement. Vertex welcomes back one of its original builders and strategic visionaries, Jordan Blake, as interim CEO, effective immediately. I stood in the very same boardroom where I'd once been blindsided, erased in front of 200 people. But now, when I spoke, every voice listened, and when I gave my first directive, it wasn't about punishment, it was about rebuilding the right way. Becoming CEO wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the one I should have always been telling. My first act wasn't revenge. It was repair. I dismantled the upper-tier rot Nathan had built. The performative executives, the vanity hires, the culture leaders who created fear instead of vision. Gone in their place. I elevated the people who'd been in the trenches. The ones who stayed late to fix bugs, who mentored interns without recognition, who had ideas that were overlooked because they didn't wear the right shoes or speak in jargon. I brought back former employees who left under Nathan's reign. People I trusted, people who'd trusted me. They returned not because of money or titles, but because they believed in what we were building. And we were building within months. We launched the product my team and I had quietly developed after I was fired. A stripped-down, intuitive solution to the exact problem Vertex had once bloated with bureaucracy. It didn't just work. It outperformed every competitor. We gained clients. We gained traction. We gained trust. And suddenly, the same publications that once regurgitated Nathan's buzzwords were now writing stories about what happened after he left. From fired to founder. The rise of Jordan Blake, the quiet strategist who outsmarted Silicon Valley's flashiest CEO. How leadership looks different when you build instead of brag. Meanwhile, Nathan tried to launch a new startup. Got a few meetings, told the same polished lies. But word had spread. He didn't retain teams. He used them. He didn't innovate. He extracted. Investors ghosted. Projects stalled. His LinkedIn updates got quieter, then stopped. I didn't gloat. I didn't clap back. I just kept working. Because the thing about being erased is, if you survive it, if you rebuild, you become something they can't ignore again. Not because you're loud, but because what you've built is louder. And as I sat in my new office one night, same floor, different corner, I looked out at the city and realized I didn't need to scream. I just needed to stand still. While the empire I quietly built did the talking, the office was nearly empty. That soft hush of a Friday evening when the city starts to wind down and the building exhales. I walked the floor like I always did, not to inspect, not to intimidate, just to feel the pulse of the place I now led, the place I rebuilt. A junior engineer, maybe 6 months in, paused as we crossed paths. He looked nervous, then handed me a folded post-it. "Thanks for seeing me," it said. Just 6 words, but I knew what they meant. I tucked it into my pocket and smiled. That used to be me, the one hoping someone noticed, someone believed, someone gave a damn about what I could become. I made my way to the corner window, the one that used to be Nathan's. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. I stood there, coffee in hand, watching the sun dip behind the skyline we both once stared at. Though for very different reasons. He fired me in front of 200 people to prove he could, to make himself look powerful, to erase me, publicly, efficiently. But real power doesn't humiliate people. It doesn't shout to be seen. It doesn't break others to feel big. Real power builds, quietly, brick by brick, person by person, until one day, without spectacle or announcement, it owns the whole damn building. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge speeches. I had legacy. I had people who believed in me. I had something no public firing could take. Respect. And as I stood there, watching the lights flicker on across the city, I said it to myself, not out of ego, but closure.